The sky over Lyme Regis was dark and threatening when a lightning bolt struck, killing the man who had been teaching little Maryanning how to explore the rocky cliffs for strange stones. She was only 15 months old, and locals believed that surviving such a strike meant she was destined for something special. That belief would prove strangely accurate. Born in 1799 into a poor family, Mary's childhood was far from ordinary. Her father, a carpenter, struggled to provide for the family, but in his free time, he taught Mary and her brother Joseph to collect fossils, then called curiosities, from the crumbling Jurassic cliffs of southern England. After his death, the family fell into poverty, but Mary continued her fossil hunting to help support them. One day, while walking along the beach, 12-year-old Mary uncovered something astonishing, a massive skull with terrifying teeth. It didn't belong to any known animal. Bit by bit, over months of patient digging, she unearthed the entire skeleton. It was unlike anything seen before. She had just discovered the first complete Ichthyosaurus fossil, though she had no idea at the time how monumental this would be. The girl with no formal education had just made history. In early 19th century Britain, science was a man's domain. Women couldn't attend universities, publish academic papers, or join scientific societies. Yet Maryanning, with no formal schooling, began uncovering secrets buried in stone that would challenge the scientific establishment. While other girls were taught to sew, Mary was studying rock layers and fossil formations. Her knowledge wasn't from books, it came from her hands, her eyes, and her relentless curiosity. She learned to read the cliffs like a library, decoding ancient life forms embedded in stone. Mary taught herself anatomy, sketching her finds in detailed notebooks. When she uncovered fossils, she didn't just see bones, she saw the structure of a long-dead creature and imagined how it lived. She even dissected modern fish and reptiles to understand how muscles and bones worked. Most scientists at the time saw fossils as mere oddities or sports of nature. Mary knew better. Her discoveries hinted at extinction, evolution, and worlds that predated humans, ideas many found uncomfortable or even heretical. She faced constant condescension from male scientists, yet they relied on her finds. They bought her specimens and built reputations on her work. Still, Mary remained in the background, her name rarely mentioned in their papers, but her legacy had already begun. When Mary uncovered the full skeleton of what would later be called an Ichthyosaurus, it caused a sensation. The creature resembled a dolphin, but was clearly not a mammal. Its enormous eyes, pointed snout, and fish-like tail suggested something much older, stranger, and more reptilian. This fossil didn't fit into the neat biblical view of life's creation. It was clear this was an extinct species from a time before humans, possibly even before many modern animals. The idea of extinction, still controversial at the time, gained traction because of Mary's find. Scientists and clergy debated whether God would allow any of his creations to vanish. But the evidence was there in stone, and Mary had unearthed it. Her discovery challenged centuries of belief and helped usher in a new scientific understanding of Earth's deep history. Still, the fossil was sold, cataloged, and displayed without crediting her name. Museums displayed her specimens, while scholars discussed them in journals, often failing to mention the young woman who had discovered them. Even so, Mary kept digging, kept observing. She was not doing this for fame. She was driven by wonder, by truth, and by a determination to understand the life that once ruled the Earth's ancient seas. In 1823, Mary unearthed another astonishing fossil, a creature with a tiny head, a serpentine neck, and a body shaped like a turtle without a shell. It was the first nearly complete plesiosaurus skeleton. The specimen defied everything scientists thought they knew. Georges Cuvier, the famed French anatomist and father of paleontology, initially accused Mary of faking the fossil, claiming such a creature couldn't exist. A neck that long, it must be assembled incorrectly. Mary, undeterred, stood by her find. She meticulously defended its authenticity, providing detailed drawings and notes to prove the fossil was excavated in one piece. Eventually, even Cuvier had to admit he was wrong. Mary was right. Again, her plesiosaurus discovery further shook the foundations of science and religion. It showed the Earth was once ruled by creatures so bizarre, they seemed like monsters from mythology. But they were real, and Mary had uncovered them. Despite her triumph, scientific papers about the find continued to be published without her name. She remained a fossil hunter, not a scientist, at least in the eyes of the establishment. Yet the truth was becoming clearer. Maryanning wasn't just collecting curiosities, she was helping to rewrite the story of life on Earth. Though Mary's discoveries stunned the scientific world, she lived in the shadows of her male contemporaries. Without academic credentials or social standing, she was excluded from formal scientific circles. She couldn't join the Geological Society of London, which didn't admit women. Her fossils were studied, illustrated, and displayed, but her name was often omitted. Men with titles and degrees took the credit, while Mary scraped by, selling fossils to survive. Her home in Lyme Regis became a quiet hub for scientists, collectors, and curious travelers. Many came seeking her expertise, but rarely acknowledged her as an equal. Despite the indignities, Mary never stopped. She walked miles in freezing rain and crumbling cliffs, chisel in hand, risking landslides and injury. Her work was meticulous. She recorded every detail, every layer of rock, every bone's position. She understood not just the fossils, but the stories they told of ancient oceans, vanished worlds, and evolutionary wonders. She was a woman of science in a time that refused to see her that way. Yet, through perseverance, Mary carved a place for herself, one fossil at a time, in the history of paleontology, even if that place remained. For now, unnamed and uncelebrated by the institutions she had quietly transformed to make ends meet. Mary and her mother ran a small fossil shop in Lyme Regis. Though modest in appearance, this little storefront was the epicenter of fossil discovery in Britain. Visitors from across Europe came to see the girl who found sea monsters. Tourists bought ammonites and belemnites as souvenirs, while scientists acquired complete skeletons for study. The shop became a crossroads of wonder and science. Young boys who would grow into scientists stood in awe of Mary's knowledge. Even Charles Lyell, the father of modern geology, visited and was influenced by her work. Behind the counter, Mary explained fossil formation, extinction, and prehistoric life to anyone who would listen. In a world where women were expected to be silent, she spoke with authority because she knew her subject better than anyone. The fossils she sold didn't just fill museum halls, they filled minds with curiosity. She inspired a generation of thinkers. Even if her name wasn't always remembered, the shop helped her survive poverty, but it also helped science survive ignorance. It was more than a business, it was a gateway to Earth's deep past. And though Mary didn't wear a lab coat or carry a university degree, she was shaping scientific thought with every transaction. Maryanning never attended university. She never published in academic journals under her own name. Yet her scientific legacy rivals that of the greatest minds of her era. She was the first to identify coprolites' fossilized feces and understood their value in studying ancient diets. She recognized that belemnites contained fossilized ink sacs, identical to modern squids, and demonstrated continuity across millions of years. She carefully documented the anatomy of her finds, producing drawings and notes that would later guide scientific research. Her meticulous observations contributed to the growing acceptance of extinction and the concept of an Earth far older than the Bible suggested. Mary practiced what we now call stratigraphy reading layers of rock to understand Earth's timeline before it was a formalized science. She anticipated principles of comparative anatomy by matching fossil bones with modern animals to reconstruct their structure and movement. Despite having no formal education, her methods were rigorous and her conclusions groundbreaking. In many ways, she embodied the spirit of modern science observation, evidence, and a relentless drive to uncover truth. Her work laid the foundation for the science of paleontology. Even though history took decades to give her credit, she wasn't just a fossil hunter, she was a scientist in every sense of the word. Maryanning died in 1847 at the age of 47 after a long battle with breast cancer. For much of her life, she remained poor, overlooked, and undervalued. But near the end, the scientific community finally began to recognize her contributions. The Geological Society of London, which had once excluded her, raised funds for her medical care and honored her with a eulogy the first time they had ever done so for a woman. Her obituary, though modest, marked a turning point. In the years that followed, her name began appearing more often in scientific histories. Charles Dickens wrote a tribute to her in a popular magazine, praising her brilliance and resilience. Museums that once displayed her fossils without attribution began to tell her story. Slowly, the world acknowledged what had long been true. Maryanning was one of the most important figures in paleontology. Today, plaques in Lyme Regis commemorate her achievements. Her home is a heritage site. Her likeness appears in books, documentaries, and classrooms. The girl who once scoured the cliffs for fossils to survive had reshaped science and inspired countless others to follow. Recognition came too late for Mary to enjoy it, but her legacy, at last, had a name for decades. Popular culture overlooked Maryanning. No blockbuster films, no statues in major cities, no awards in her name. Even as Hollywood romanticized male adventurers and scientists, Mary's story remained in the shadows. But history has a way of correcting its course. Today, scholars, educators, and artists are reclaiming her narrative. Novels have been written about her life. Museums now teach children her story alongside her fossils. A campaign led to a statue in her hometown, finally honoring her contributions. Her name has been given to newly discovered species, ensuring she lives on not just in memory, but in the scientific record. Mary represents something larger than fossils. She stands for the many women throughout history whose work was erased or diminished. Her story is a reminder that discovery doesn't always come with a diploma, and that genius isn't limited to the privileged. In recent years, films and books have started to explore her legacy. Though long overdue, the world is beginning to see her as the pioneer she was. While Hollywood may have looked elsewhere, the fossil record tells a different tale, one in which Maryanning played a starring role. And now, her name is finally being spoken with the reverence it deserves. Maryanning's story isn't just about the past, it's about the present and the future.